Welcome to the Bible in Our Culture, an outreach radio ministry of Liberty Remnant Church, where we encourage you to view the culture through the lens of the Holy Bible.
What are you ashamed of in this hour? And what is the body of Christ in America ashamed of? It's an important question to ask ourselves, and we're going to talk about it today on the Bible and our culture. It's important that we know our Bibles, we have a biblical worldview, so we can discern all the lies that are being thrown at us all the time through entertainment, through media, through education system, through our neighbors. So many lies are coming at us all the time. And if we don't know our Bible, we won't be able to discern where the errors are in the culture. In fact, we're seeing a trend today in the so-called movement of Christianity where people are looking at the Bible and saying, well, that can't possibly mean that. I'm going to pick and choose which verses I want to believe so I can still be popular with the world. Well, Jesus seemed to frown on that. And we read last time from the book of Mark, verse 8:34. It says, when he had called the people to himself with his disciples also, he said to them, now check it out. I mentioned this last time, but I want to repeat it. Jesus rarely ever initiated conversations in the Bible. Just a couple of times did he do that. And this is one of them, where he actually said, hey, I got something I want to tell you all. Come around. Hey, disciples, go get everybody and bring them in. And maybe if he could whistle, he'd whistle and say, come on, everybody, I got a message for you. And this is his message here in the last part of verse 34 of Mark 8. Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with his angels. So last time we talked about the call of Jesus, that he expects everything. He expects us to surrender all, and a life completely surrendered to him is his message. He doesn't have much of a sales pitch like we would think today, where, hey, listen to me, this is what's a benefit to you. He's basically saying, I hold all the cards, I'm the king, forsake all and follow me. Because when he was saying, pick up your cross and follow me, he was basically saying this is a death sentence. So here in verse 35, he talks about being ashamed of him. Now, a lot of people misquote this. They say, if we deny him before others, he'll deny us before the Father in heaven. Well, that's not quite true. I think it's been confused because Peter was so ashamed of Jesus that he denied that he knew him. At least he was one of the only disciple that was anywhere near him after Jesus was arrested. But the idea is Peter denied him because he was ashamed, and so we shouldn't deny Jesus. Well, I don't think I would deny Jesus very easily, but unconsciously, if I get too controlled by the world, if I start thinking according to the pattern of this age, I might start feeling myself ashamed of him and be less apt to want to share the wonderful story of the gospel and share what he's done in my life and the hope that I have in me. So too many people would say, well, if you talk about Jesus, that's just too personal. You can't ask people direct questions about where they're at spiritually and where they're at on their spiritual journey and what do they think of Jesus. You can't ask people that because that's just too personal. You got to wait till you get to know them. And it is important to get to know people and build relationships so you can talk about Jesus. But this idea that we ought to be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ is a bunch of baloney. It is the power of God to save. And Jesus here says, hey, if you're thinking that's too personal a question to talk about me, then before my Father, when he comes with his angels, I'm going to be too ashamed. I'm going to think this is too personal. Father, don't ask me about this guy because it's too personal right now. I don't want to talk about him at this point because it's just too personal. That's makes me a little nervous here. That's how we are. And Jesus said, that's how I'm going to be with you. And it's a really scary, scary verse. So where does this thinking come from that it's too personal to talk about Jesus? Well, it's certainly not in the Bible. And we talked about this some yesterday, that we don't like to, quote unquote, evangelize, which the world has said is to proselytize. I don't see evangelism anywhere close to proselytizing. If somebody's house is burning on the east side of their home, and I can see them sitting at the dining room table on the west side of their home, it's not proselytizing to go and tell them their house is on fire. But that's evangelism. Really, I'm saying, hey, if you don't know Jesus and you could die today, you're not going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell. So I'm warning people. And there's something about it. We should never say that. It's crazy. So we've been ashamed of the gospel. We've been ashamed of Jesus, and he don't appreciate that. Think about your spouse if you're married, or if you've ever been in a close relationship with a member of the opposite sex. Could you imagine denying that you knew them, being ashamed of them, not wanting people to know that you were together? Could you imagine if my wife was embarrassed of me and didn't want to talk nice about me in front of other people? She was so embarrassed of me. That would hurt. I'd have to get special prayer and inner healing if that happened. Thank God it hasn't. But I would be absolutely appalled if she was ashamed of me. And vice versa. I don't think I'd get away with it if the shoe were on the other foot either. And Jesus says, I feel the same way. Don't pretend like you don't know me. I the most important thing in your life. Didn't I die for you? Didn't I regenerate you by the power of the Holy Spirit and make you my own? Why would you be ashamed of me? But we're ashamed to share our testimony. And it's not only evangelism that we're ashamed. The world wants to silence our voices in the area of morals. The secularists are surprisingly bold about their immorality, but Christians are surprisingly ashamed about our Bible centered morality. I mean, have some morals. Where do the morals come from? Well, to me, if you think we evolved from pond slime and you believe in Darwin's theory of evolution, well, then there is no reason to have morals. Just a survival of the fittest. Get what you can. If you can stab somebody in the back and get a few benefits for yourself, do it. But if there's a God and the God is involved in our lives, then there ought to be morals. We ought to treat others the way we want to be treated, and so on. We ought to love others. That's all the law and the prophet. I mentioned last time that the Republican Party has really backpedaled 30 years ago to unborn babies' basic human rights. It used to be in the 90s that you couldn't even admit you were pro-life, you might not get elected. But then in the late 90s, early 2000s, and for quite a while, we converted a lot of people that if you're going to be a Republican, you better be pro-life. Mitt Romney, who I know was a kind of a Republican in name only, but he was one of those pro-abortion Republicans, but the pressure was so strong that he had to convert, so to speak. Same with John McCain and many others. They had to become pro-life if they're going to be Republicans. But now look at the Republican Party. It's not even pro-life anymore. Donald Trump was the most pro-life president ever. And now he's the least pro-life Republican president since Gerald Ford. And it breaks my heart. But we're ashamed of the whole issue of a right to life. We're ashamed of human rights. We don't want to say that the unborn human child is a human person when he or she clearly is. That's another message. But we've also noticed how many Republicans seem to pat themselves on the back for opposing child sex change operations, which they should oppose, but they don't do anything to put any teeth in their position. They don't charge the predators with child abuse. Every teacher that refers somebody to have sex change operations or go get hormone blocker drugs or whatever, they should lose their license. They should not be allowed to practice education if that should happen. That's the type of leadership we need. Why are Republicans ashamed of the issue? They say, well, we oppose it, but they aren't going to do anything to stop it? Come on. Get your act together, Republican Party. You embarrass me. I'm a PCO. I'm a longtime member of the Republican Party, but man, it stinks the direction that they've gone. Why do they not take away the medical license of those who insist on whacking off healthy body parts of kids, or anybody for that matter? That's, to me, just the basic bare minimum that we could ask. Well, I think there's this problem of we're ashamed of our morals, and we shouldn't be. If your morals are biblical, it's really not you who came up with them, it's God. Now, here's the thing. Many of us aren't really ashamed of Jesus, but we are ashamed of ourselves. The devil and the world system has been very successful at making the word hypocrisy synonymous with Christianity. I don't think it's as much as people say it is. Obviously, there is hypocrisy in the church. There's hypocrisy in my life. It's really easy to know what to do. It's another thing to consistently do it over and over again. So everybody's hypocritical to some degree. But today, we basically don't want to admit that we're Christians because we don't want to be thought of as hypocrites. But here's the thing, too. If I've ever done anything wrong ever in my life, I feel like I can't take a stand for righteousness because I don't want to be associated with hypocrisy. And yeah, back in third grade, I did lie to my teacher. And so I have no right to be able to share Jesus with anybody. I mean, that seems a little exaggerated, but it's not really. Most believers today feel they are too ashamed of themselves that they don't have any right to share the gospel. And they do. And they have a right to stand for God-fearing morality and morals as well. They say that 52% of those who left religion say they did so between 15 and 25 years of age, with the most common age being 18 when a child goes off to college. And the number one reason, there's a lot of reasons why people back away from the faith, but the number one reason they say is hypocrisy. So the enemy has made hypocrisy associated with Christianity. When I say hypocrisy, it should be associated with leftism and secularism and the Democrat Party and all this baloney being shoved down our throats all the time. They're the real hypocrites in their philosophy and usually in their practice. They tell us, you don't judge, but then they make us recycle and they make us get vaccines and they make us wear masks and they make us shut down our churches during a cold. I mean, come on. They are absolute hypocrites. There's hypocrites in the church as well. But here's the thing. If we don't know all the answers and we share Jesus with somebody, most people feel like, well, if they ask a question or make an objection, I don't have an answer, then I'm to be blamed for it. I'll probably seal the heathen's faith in hell eternally. They feel really bad about that. How do I know? Well, I've talked to Christians, and I know because I feel that way sometimes. And especially when I was a young man first starting to share my faith, I thought, oh, I didn't have a good comeback, so now they're going to believe wrongly all these years that if they go to hell, it's going to be my fault. Now, that's not what the Holy Spirit was telling me, but that's certainly what the accuser of the brethren, Satan, was telling me. The enemy was wanting to shut my voice, want to shut your mouth. We don't share Jesus with people. A lot of people today in Christianity feel that they can lead people to Jesus without ever having anyone upset with them for bringing his name up. It's not possible today. If you share Jesus with a lot of people, you probably get a lot of people saved, but you're also going to have a lot of people get really upset with you. Jesus and other New Testament writers forewarned that being hated and persecuted were the norm. If you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to be hated, you're going to be persecuted. And here's the thing, in today's culture, if we're not hated and persecuted, did we really say anything worth saying? I mean, if we're just going to go along with what everybody else says and say what's politically correct and never get persecuted, we're not really saying anything. But if we're saying Jesus is the only way, that you all are sinners and Jesus died to forgive you of your sin, now we're saying something that's worth saying and people may not like it. Even a lot of Christians don't like it. Jesus said in John 15, starting verse 18, if the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Doesn't that sound like we should be afraid if we're not hated? Maybe we're not really following Jesus if nobody ever persecutes us once in a while. That's a good question to ask, especially when you see the appetite and the Antichrist spirit in today's culture. I posted a meme on our church's Facebook page, Liberty Remnant Church, and it says this: aren't you afraid of losing friends over your posts on controversial topics? And the reply is, no, I'm afraid of remaining silent and watching evil advance. I'm afraid of seeing friends and their loved ones suffer because they lack knowledge. Oh, that's so true and so good. We need to think about that. Are we afraid that if we say something, even on Facebook, sitting in our jammies, that people are going to be upset? So what? Now, it's better, I think, you say it in person, and you say it in love, and you say it courteously, and you listen, and you affirm somebody's value, but you still say the same message, a message that people aren't going to like. Let's take a short break and be back in 60 seconds.
About 4 years ago, Liberty Remnant Church was founded in North Spokane by a group of committed Christ followers believing that God sought to build a distinct local church for His glory. LRC is a simple, relational, biblical church that is not afraid to apply biblical principles to weighty current-day issues. In fact, we feel God expects it of His church. Pastor Jay McPherson hosts a regular radio show on this station called The Bible and Our Culture. Like on the radio program, LRC believes God has called His church to represent Christ's love, power, and wisdom in any and every facet of our society. If you're looking for a local church or know someone who is, please consider what God is doing at Liberty Remnant Church. Sunday service is at 10 a.m. just a block east of Newport Highway on 4301 East Day, Mount Spokane Road. For more information or to contact our pastor, please check out our website at libertyremnantchurch.org.
On the Bible and our culture, we've been talking about how Jesus expects us to come to Him on His terms, where He expects everything. He expects us to surrender our whole life and follow Him. Take up your cross and follow me, He said. And everybody knew that picking up your cross was basically a death sentence, because that's what they did to their prisoners who were deemed guilty of death. They had to carry their cross and be crucified. Jesus would have to do this maybe a year or so later after he said this. But there's many other places throughout the scriptures where he talks about us being hated. And I'm disturbed. I see in my own life, I feel too awkward when I share Jesus with somebody, or if I'm with other believers and they want to share Jesus with somebody. That seems awkward to me, and it shouldn't. I don't want to be ashamed of Jesus. That's what he said there in the book of Mark, and I think also in Matthew and Luke. Don't be ashamed of me, lest I be ashamed of you before my Father. He says in Luke 6, verse 22, it's thought of as the Sermon on the Valley. It's very similar to the Sermon on the Mount, but it was in a different place. It was much shorter, and it was recorded in Luke. He says, verse 22 of chapter 6, blessed are you when men hate you, and when they exclude you, and revile you, and cast out your name as evil for the Son of Man's sake. Doesn't that sound like being a conservative Christian today? Being somebody that is accused of being a Christian nationalist because we love Jesus and we love our country? They're going to cast out your name as evil. They're working hard. There are some clever people figuring out ways to paint us with a brush of evil because we love America and we love Jesus and we have morals. Jesus goes on to say in verse 23, rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for indeed your reward is great in heaven. For in like manner their fathers did to the prophets. So it's not only that it should be normal that we're hated and persecuted and called names. We should leap for joy. We should be so excited because, hey, we're going to get paid. Down the road, up in heaven, and maybe even in this life, God's going to reward us. And God loves us, and He knows us, and He's really wealthy. He owns everything. He knows just how to reward us. I'm looking forward to heaven. I think we should have our eyes more on the eternal than on the temporal. And I see that a God who loves me, and man, every good feeling that I've ever had in my life, He could put all that together, multiply it by 100, and let me live that way in heaven forever. He wants to reward me, and I just don't want to be ashamed of Him down here. So perhaps many people aren't persecuted because we're too ashamed to speak up. I'm concerned that's a problem. Is it a problem in your life? Let me just ask. Do you find yourself ashamed of Jesus, ashamed of the principles of godliness and righteousness that you live? Be aware of this demonic onslaught on the church's voice. The devil is the accuser of the brethren and the deceiver of the world and the father of lies. He's gonna make you feel like you're screwing up every time you try and open your mouth and stand for something that's right, but you're not. You're doing a great job. And here's the thing, in America, we aren't really persecuted for standing up for Jesus. We're not really persecuted like they were in the Bible. Or we might get a lot of people angry at us. And there are people that are being locked up for preaching in the streets and that sort of thing, but they usually get out. If there's any justice anywhere, they're going to get out and everything's going to be fine. But we don't even like to be awkward. It's not that we're fleeing persecution. We're fleeing just that awkward feeling if we share Jesus with somebody and they don't like it. That's an awkward feeling. We feel like if we do that, then we're bad Christians. No, you're not. Get comfortable with the awkwardness of Jesus. He wasn't ashamed of you. Why should we be ashamed of him? So if talking about Jesus and his ways make you uncomfortable, the big question is why? If people find fault with your way of sharing Jesus, and there will be Christians, all sorts of critique on the better way to do it, but if they find fault with your way of sharing Jesus, well, your way of doing it is better than their way of not doing it. So do it. Find creative ways to share a reason for the hope that is in you. Now, I mentioned earlier that Mark 8 was one of the few times in all of Scripture where Jesus actually initiated a conversation. In most of his conversations and most of what he did in the Gospels, he was interrupted. Somebody else was asking him a question or asking him a favor. But in Mark 8, he initiates the conversation. He gets everybody together and wants to tell them what's important to him. And he says, take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow me. Well, one of the few places, maybe the only other place in the Gospels, I'm not sure, is Luke 14, where he has a very similar message. Luke 14, verse 25 says, now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Yikes, that's terrible marketing, people would say. Not according to Jesus. This is what Jesus says when he has the floor. Whenever Jesus had the opportunity to initiate a conversation, this was his topic. Hey, if you're not going to give up everything, bear your cross and come after me, you can't be my disciple. You even got to hate everybody else in your own life. That doesn't mean hate like we often think of today, but it basically means I'm always going to prefer Jesus over everybody else. And if I do something they don't like because I'm following Jesus, so what? I can't let their opinion of me influence me in any other way but to follow Jesus with my whole heart. He goes on to say in verse 28, for which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to mock him. Goes on to talk about the king going out in war against another king. He should first figure out if he thinks that he has enough manpower to defeat this other army, or he's going to go and try and make arrangements of peace. He's basically saying, count the cost. Figure out, do you really want to follow me? In verse 33, he says, so likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. He wants it all. He's greedy, a lot of people think. He doesn't respect my boundaries. No, he doesn't. He's king. He doesn't respect your boundaries. Now, he's not going to overpower your will, let me be clear, but he expects you to sign a blank contract and give it to him for him to fill in the rest. There are things in life that require every bit of who you are. For example, marriage. What if on my wedding day I told my wife, honey, I love you so much. 51 weeks out of the year are yours and yours only, but 1 week out of the year, all the other women of the world are available. And look at you, I'm excluding all other women 51 weeks out of the year, but one of those weeks, I'm going to say free game for anybody and everybody. How do you think my wife would feel? Well, she'd be ticked. And I would if she was doing the same thing to me. The point is, some things in life require everything, and marriage is one of them. You can't get married and then have adultery and all these sexual affairs with other people. That's not what marriage is about. You expect everything, and even the world calls it cheating when you commit adultery. How about this? How about if a cop knocks on your door and says, hey, there's a burglar here, he's stolen some money, we don't have a warrant, but we want to search your house and just cross it off our list, and we'll go on to the next house if that's okay with you. Well, if you say, yes, search my whole house, they're probably going to think everything's fine. But what if you just say something like this? You can search my whole house, but the downstairs bedroom on the northeast corner, don't search that room. But every bit of the rest of the house you can search. What do you think the cops are going to do? They're just going to go send somebody immediately to go get a warrant because they're thinking they're going to want to search that downstairs bedroom in the northeast corner because that's what you said you wouldn't let them have. And that's kind of how Jesus is. He expects everything. He expects upstairs, downstairs, every room. And if you say, well, I'm not going to give you this, well, he's going to go after that. Not because he's mean, not because he's greedy, but he loves you and he expects your whole heart. And he knows you're going to be happy, more happy giving him your whole heart than trying to serve him here and there. Or how about this? I made brownies. They're my special recipe. And I want you to know that 95% of this is my pure brownies recipe. Only 5% is poop. Only 5%. Are you going to want the brownies? No. Well, just 5%. Come on, 95% is award-winning brownies, famous brownie mix. Just 5%. You can say, I don't want your brownies at all. I want it pure, 100%. That's exactly how Jesus treats us. He expects everything. If we don't forsake all that we have, we cannot be his disciple. So let's come to Jesus on his terms. I think there's way too many church growth experts that seem to have their priorities out of order. There's some wisdom in some church growth experts' studies, but a lot of them seem to think, how can we make a sale? How can we appease people? How can we put a product before them that they'll want to come to our church and maybe we can cater to them and all that? Jesus didn't act that way, really. Jesus said, hey, unless you hate your own life, you can't be my disciple. Unless you deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me, don't bother following. Basically what he said. Well, it's glad to have you with us on the Bible and our culture, where we look at the culture through the lens of the Bible and don't look at the Bible through the lens of the culture. Hope to catch you next time right here. If you want to contact me, you can do so at office@libertyremnantchurch.org. Once again, that's office@libertyremnantchurch.org. Catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Bible and Our Culture, an outreach radio ministry of Liberty Remnant Church. If you would like to help support this ministry, you can go to our website, libertyremnantchurch.org/give, and select radio ministry. Be sure to tune in weekday mornings at 7 a.m. Thanks for listening. God bless.